The stagecoach rattled to a halt in front of the Silvertop Hotel, kicking up clouds of dust that shimmered golden in the late afternoon sun. Helena Vaughn clutched her small valise tightly, her knuckles white with exhaustion and determination. After 3 days of grueling travel across the rugged terrain of Colorado, she had finally reached Ouray, a mining town nestled in the San Juan Mountains like a pearl in a rough-hewn oyster. The year was 1885, and Helena was the last person anyone would expect to see arriving alone in a frontier mining town. Her traveling suit, once fine navy wool with modest lace trim, was now creased and road-worn. Her chestnut hair, usually arranged in an elegant chignon, had escaped its pins during the bumpy journey, with tendrils framing her face in a way that would have scandalized her family back in Boston. "End of the line, madam," the driver called, already busy unloading the mail sacks. Helena stepped down carefully, wincing as her boots met solid ground. The town of Ouray was smaller than she'd imagined, but bustling with activity. Miners, merchants, and all manner of frontier folk moved purposefully along the wooden boardwalks. The majestic mountains towered on all sides, making the settlement appear even more diminutive, like a child's toy village set among giants. She lifted her chin and straightened her spine, ignoring the curious glances from passers-by. At 25, Helena was no stranger to scrutiny, but here in the West, a woman traveling alone invited particular attention. She walked resolutely toward the hotel, her steps measured and confident despite her fatigue. The Silvertop Hotel stood 3 stories tall, its freshly painted facade a stark contrast to the weathered buildings surrounding it. A sign in the window proclaimed, "Hot baths available," a luxury Helena desperately craved after days of travel. The lobby was mercifully empty save for a thin man with spectacles perched on a narrow nose. He glanced up from his ledger as the small bell above the door announced her entry. "Good afternoon," Helena said, her Boston accent immediately marking her as an outsider. "I would like a room, please. Just for a few nights while I settle my affairs in town." The clerk's eyes narrowed as he took in her solitary state. "Traveling alone, Mrs. Helena corrected, though the title was now a painful reminder of all she'd left behind. "Mrs. Vaughn, and yes, I am traveling alone." The clerk's thin lips pressed together in disapproval. "I'm afraid that won't be possible. The Silvertop is a respectable establishment. We don't rent rooms to unaccompanied ladies." Helena felt heat rise to her cheeks. "Sir, I assure you I am a respectable woman. I merely require lodging. Our policy is firm," he interrupted, closing his ledger with a snap. "Perhaps you might try Mrs. Holloway's boarding house at the edge of town, though I doubt she'll take you without references." As Helena opened her mouth to protest further, the door behind her opened, bringing with it the scent of leather, horses, and the crisp mountain air. Heavy footsteps crossed the wooden floor, and a deep voice spoke from just behind her right shoulder. "Problem here, Simmons." Helena turned to find herself looking up at a tall man, whose presence seemed to fill the small lobby. He wore the practical attire of a rancher, a worn leather vest over a simple shirt, sturdy denims, and boots caked with trail dust. His face was tanned from long days under the Colorado sun, with lines at the corners of his eyes that suggested he smiled often, though he wasn't smiling now. A dark hat was pushed back on his head, revealing hair the color of sun-bleached wheat. "No problem, Mr. Blackwell," the clerk replied. "Just explaining our policies to the lady." The stranger's eyes, a startling blue against his tanned skin, flicked to Helena and then back to the clerk. "Which policies would those be?" "The one about unaccompanied women," Simmons said primly. "Mrs. Vaughn here has no escort, no references." The Silvertop has standards to maintain. Helena felt mortification and anger battle within her. This is absurd. I have money to pay. I'm not asking for charity, merely a room for the night. The tall man considered her for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Then he turned back to the clerk. "Give Mrs. Vaughn my room, Simmons. I'll take the hayloft in my barn tonight." Simmons sputtered. "But Mr. Blackwell, Owen Blackwell, pays for that room whether I sleep in it or not," the man Owen said firmly. "And I say Mrs. Vaughn stays there tonight." He turned to Helena. "If that's agreeable to you, madam." Helena hesitated. Accepting such an offer from a stranger went against everything she'd been taught about propriety. Yet the alternative was sleeping on a bench at the stage-coach office, or trying to find this boarding house with no guarantee of acceptance. "That's very kind, Mr. Blackwell, but I couldn't possibly—" "It's no trouble," he interrupted, his voice gentler now. "I spend half my nights in that barn anyway when I work late. The room's paid through the week and it's going to waste." Before she could protest further, he turned to the clerk. "Get the lady settled, Simmons, and have some hot water sent up for a bath." He placed a coin on the counter. "And dinner from the kitchen." The clerk's lips thinned even further, but he took the coin and reached for a key from the rack behind him. Owen Blackwell tipped his hat to Helena. "Mrs. Vaughn, enjoy your stay in Ouray." Then, without waiting for her thanks, he strode back out the door, leaving behind only the lingering scent of leather and sun-warmed earth. The clerk handed her the key reluctantly. "Room 204, second floor. Mr. Blackwell's belongings will be removed shortly." Helena accepted the key, still bewildered by the sudden turn of events. "Thank you, and please tell Mr. Blackwell that I'm deeply grateful for his kindness." As she climbed the stairs to the second floor, Helena couldn't help but wonder about the man who had so casually given up his room to a stranger. Such gallantry seemed out of place in this rough-hewn town, as unexpected as finding a blooming rose in the desert. The room was simple but clean, with a narrow bed, a washstand with a porcelain basin, a small writing desk, and a window that overlooked the main street of Ouray. True to the clerk's word, there were no personal belongings visible. Whoever had been sent to clear Owen Blackwell's things had been efficient. Soon after, a young maid arrived with steaming buckets of water for the copper tub that stood in the corner behind a folding screen. Helena thanked her warmly, then indulged in the luxury of a hot bath, washing away the dust and fatigue of the journey. As she soaked, she contemplated the path that had led her to this remote mountain town, so far from everything she had known. Helena had not planned to travel west alone. But when her husband of 3 years, Thomas Vaughn, had succumbed to consumption just 6 months after they'd received the deed to a silver mine in Colorado, an investment he'd made without consulting her, she'd found herself with few options. The mine, according to the lawyer's letters, was potentially valuable but required attention. With her parents gone and her in-laws making it clear they considered the mine a foolish investment not worth pursuing, Helena had made the difficult decision to see to it herself. "I'll sell it," she had told herself during the long journey west. "I'll assess its value, find a buyer, and return to Boston with enough money to live modestly but independently." Now, sitting in a borrowed hotel room in a town where respectable establishments wouldn't rent to an unaccompanied woman, Helena wondered if she had been naive to think it would be so simple. After her bath, she dressed in her cleanest remaining outfit, a practical gray day dress that had fared better than most during the journey. A soft knock at the door announced the arrival of dinner, a hearty stew, fresh bread, and a pot of surprisingly good coffee. Helena ate by the window, watching as the shadows lengthened across the town, and the lamplighter made his rounds, bringing Ouray's main street to a golden glow in the gathering dusk. She found her thoughts returning to Owen Blackwell. What sort of man gives up his room to a stranger and sleeps in a barn? Was he merely being chivalrous, or did he have some ulterior motive? Her experience in Boston society had taught her to be wary of seemingly generous offers from men. Yet there had been something straightforward in his manner that inspired trust. The next morning, Helena woke early, determined to begin making inquiries about her late husband's mine. After dressing and arranging her hair in a simple but neat style, she made her way downstairs to the hotel's dining room for breakfast. The room was already busy with guests and locals who paid for the hotel's well-regarded morning fare. Helena felt the weight of curious stares as she was shown to a small table by the window. She kept her back straight and her expression composed, refusing to show discomfort. She had just been served coffee when a shadow fell across her table. Looking up, she found herself once again facing Owen Blackwell. In the morning light streaming through the window, she could better appreciate the strong lines of his face and the surprising gentleness in his eyes, despite his rugged appearance. "Mrs. Vaughn," he said, removing his hat. "I hope you found the accommodations satisfactory." "More than satisfactory, Mr. Blackwell," she replied. "I'm deeply grateful for your kindness. Please, won't you join me? Allow me to thank you properly by purchasing your breakfast." A smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. "That's not necessary, madam, but I won't turn down the company if the offer's sincere." He pulled out the chair opposite her and sat down, placing his hat on the empty chair beside him. A waitress approached immediately, clearly familiar with him. "The usual Mr. Blackwell?" she asked with a warm smile. "That would be fine, Sarah, thank you," he replied. When the waitress had gone, Helena found herself studying her benefactor. In daylight, she could see that he was probably in his early 30s, with a face that spoke of hard work outdoors but also an intelligence that belied the simple rancher's attire. "I must apologize for imposing on you last night," Helena began. "I hadn't anticipated such difficulty in securing lodging." Owen shook his head. "No apology needed. Simmons can be overprotective of the Silvertop's reputation. Ouray's growing more civilized by the day, but old attitudes die hard. Nevertheless, you sacrificed your comfort for a stranger. I hope your barn was not too uncomfortable." A genuine smile spread across his face then, transforming his features and causing an unexpected flutter in Helena's chest. "I've slept in far worse places, Mrs. Vaughn. My hayloft is practically luxurious compared to some spots I've bedded down in. Still, I cannot continue to impose. I'll need to find more permanent lodgings today. What brings you to Ouray, if you don't mind my asking?" Owen inquired as the waitress returned with his breakfast, a generous plate of eggs, bacon, and potatoes. Helena hesitated only briefly. "My late husband invested in a silver mine near here. I've come to assess its value and hopefully arrange for its sale." Owen's eyebrows rose slightly as he cut into his eggs. "I'm sorry for your loss, Mrs. Vaughn. Mining investments can be tricky business, especially for those not familiar with the territory." "So I'm discovering," Helena replied. "I had hoped to meet with the mine manager today, but I'm not entirely sure where to begin." Owen considered this as he chewed thoughtfully. "What's the name of the mine?" "The Liberty Bell," Helena said. "According to the deed, it's located in the mountains just outside of town." Owen set down his fork, surprise evident on his face. "The Liberty Bell? Are you certain?" Helena frowned, reaching for her handbag. "Quite certain. I have the deed right here if you'd like to see it." Owen waved this off. No, I believe you. It's just, the Liberty Bell hasn't been operational for nearly a year now." Helena felt as though the floor had dropped away beneath her. "What?" but the lawyer's letters indicated it was a working mine with promising yields. It was, at one point, Owen said carefully. But there was a collapse last winter. No one was hurt, thankfully, but it was deemed too unstable to continue operations safely. The previous owner must have sold it to your husband after that happened. Helena sank back in her chair, her appetite gone. So I've traveled all this way for nothing. The mine is worthless. I wouldn't say worthless, Owen replied, his blue eyes holding hers steadily. The claim itself still has value. There's silver in those mountains, Mrs. Vaughn. It's just a matter of whether investing in making the mine safe again would be worth the potential return. I know nothing about mining, Helena admitted. I came here intending to sell as quickly as possible and return east. Owen wiped his mouth with his napkin, thinking, I might be able to help you get a fair assessment. I do some business with the mining companies. My ranch provides horses for transportation and hauling ore. I know people who could give you an honest opinion of what your options might be. Hope flickered in Helena's chest. You would do that for me, after already being so kind, Owen shrugged, a gesture that managed to be both casual and elegant. Ouray's a small town, Mrs. Vaughn. We help each other out. Besides, I'd hate to see anyone taken advantage of because they're new to the area. Thank you, Mr. Blackwell. I would be most grateful for any assistance. Helena hesitated, then added, however, I must still resolve my housing situation. I cannot continue to occupy your room. Actually, Owen said, I might have a solution for that as well. My sister, Olivia, runs a small but respectable boarding house not far from my ranch. It's simpler than the Silvertop, but clean and comfortable. And she doesn't share Simmons's narrow-minded policies about unaccompanied women. Relief flooded through Helena. That sounds perfect. I would be happy to speak with her as soon as possible. I can take you there today, after I finish some business in town, Owen offered. And perhaps tomorrow, if you're agreeable, I could show you the location of your mine. Helena nodded gratefully. That would be most helpful, Mr. Blackwell. Owen, he said, if we're going to be working together on this, you might as well call me Owen. Thank you. Owen, Helena replied, finding herself oddly pleased at this small familiarity. And you must call me Helena. After breakfast, they parted ways, with Owen promising to return for her mid-afternoon. Helena spent the morning organizing her belongings and writing a detailed letter to her solicitor in Boston, explaining what she had learned so far about the mine. She would not post it, yet not until she had more concrete information, but the act of writing helped order her thoughts. True to his word, Owen returned at 3 o'clock, driving a sturdy wagon rather than riding horseback as he had the day before. He helped Helena load her trunk and valise, then assisted her onto the wagon seat beside him. As they left Ouray behind, following a well-maintained road that wound through the valley, Helena found herself entranced by the scenery. The late June afternoon was warm but pleasant, with a gentle breeze carrying the scent of pine and wildflowers. The mountains that had seemed intimidating from town now revealed their true majesty, their slopes covered in dark green forests that gave way to rocky peaks still capped with snow despite the summer season. It's breathtaking, Helena murmured, unable to contain her awe. Owen glanced at her, a smile playing at his lips. Different from Boston, I imagine. Entirely different, Helena agreed. I had no idea such places existed outside of paintings. That's why I never left, Owen said. I came west with my parents when I was just a boy. My father was looking for gold but found good grazing land instead. He built our ranch from nothing. Pride colored his voice. When he passed 5 years ago, I took over. Never once regretted staying. Your sister remained as well. Owen nodded. Olivia stayed to help me with the ranch after our mother died. Started taking in boarders a couple of years ago when the mining boom brought more people to the area. She's got a good head for business." As he spoke, they rounded a bend in the road, revealing a large meadow nestled between forested hillsides. A substantial two-story house stood near the center, painted a cheerful yellow with white trim. Behind it was a complex of outbuildings, a large barn, corrals, and what looked like bunkhouses. Horses grazed peacefully in fenced pastures that stretched toward the trees. "Blackwell Ranch," Owen announced with undisguised pride. "Been in our family for 25 years now." Helena was impressed. This was no simple frontier dwelling, but a well-established operation that spoke of hard work and prosperity. "It's lovely." They continued past the main ranch, following a smaller track that led to another house set a short distance away. This one was more modest but equally well-maintained, with a deep porch wrapping around two sides and flower boxes bursting with colorful blooms beneath every window. As Owen brought the wagon to a halt in front, the door opened to reveal a woman in her late 20s with the same wheat-colored hair as her brother, though hers was pulled back in a practical braid. She wore a simple blue dress with an apron tied around her waist, and her smile was warm and welcoming. "You must be Mrs. Vaughn," she called, coming down the steps to greet them. "Owen rode by this morning to tell me you were coming. I'm Olivia Blackwell." Owen jumped down from the wagon and helped Helena descend. "Livy, this is Helena Vaughn. She's in need of lodging while she handles some business regarding a mine she's inherited." Olivia's handshake was firm and confident. "Pleased to meet you, Mrs. Vaughn. I've got a lovely room at the back of the house with its own entrance. It gets wonderful morning light." "That sounds perfect, Miss Blackwell," Helena replied, "and please call me Helena." "Olivia, then," the other woman said with a smile. "Let's get you settled. I'm sure you'll want to wash up before supper. We eat at 6, though if you prefer privacy, you can take meals in your room for a small additional fee." "Community meals are fine," Helena assured her. "I've had quite enough solitude during my journey west." While Olivia showed Helena to her room, which was indeed lovely, with a comfortable-looking bed, a small sitting area, and a window that framed a view of the mountains Owen brought in her trunk and valise. The room opened onto the side porch through its own door, just as Olivia had described, offering both privacy and easy access. "This is wonderful," Helena said sincerely. "Far better than I had hoped for." "I'm glad you approve," Olivia replied. "The washroom is down the hall, shared with one other boarder, a widow who teaches at the school in town. There's always hot water on the stove if you need it." She headed for the door. "I'll leave you to get settled. Owen, are you staying for supper?" Owen, who had been standing quietly by the door, shook his head. "Not tonight, Livy. I've got to check on a sick mare, but I'll be by in the morning to take Mrs. Vaughn Helena to see her mine." After they'd gone, Helena unpacked her few belongings, arranging them neatly in the room's small dresser and wardrobe. She washed her face and hands in the basin provided, then changed into a fresh blouse, feeling more settled than she had since leaving Boston. Supper was a pleasant affair, with Olivia and her other boarder, Mrs. Elena Wright, a gentle woman in her early 40s with kind eyes and a ready smile providing engaging conversation. Helena learned that Olivia's boarding house had been operating for just over 2 years and had quickly gained a reputation for cleanliness, good food, and a peaceful atmosphere. "Your brother mentioned that you help with the ranch as well," Helena said as they enjoyed slices of fresh baked apple pie after the main course. Olivia nodded. "I keep the books for Owen. He's a wonderful rancher but has little patience for figures. And I still help with the gardening and preserving." Our mother taught me well. The ranch seems quite substantial, Helena observed. Has your brother always been in the horse business? Not always, Helena answered before Olivia could. Owen used to be a lawman, didn't he, Olivia? Before your father passed, Olivia nodded. He was a deputy in Silverton for a few years, then marshal here in Ouray. He only gave it up when Pa died and the ranch needed his full attention. This new information added another dimension to Helena's growing impression of Owen Blackwell. A former lawman turned rancher who still made time to help strangers, the man was becoming more intriguing by the moment. He seems very kind, Helena said carefully. I'm most grateful for his assistance. That's Owen, Olivia said with obvious affection, always looking out for others. Though I must say, he doesn't usually go so far as to give up his hotel room and sleep in the barn. Her eyes twinkled with gentle teasing. You must have made quite an impression. Helena felt her cheeks warm. I assure you, it was purely a gentlemanly gesture. We'd never met before yesterday. That makes it even more remarkable, Helena commented. Not many men would extend such courtesy to a complete stranger. Later, alone in her comfortable room, Helena found her thoughts returning to Owen Blackwell. There was something about him, a quiet strength, an unwavering integrity that she found both comforting and unsettling. Comforting because in this unfamiliar territory, having such an ally was invaluable. Unsettling because she hadn't expected to feel such immediate trust toward a man she barely knew. You're here for business, Helena, she reminded herself firmly. Assess the mine, sell it if possible, and return to Boston. Nothing more. Yet as she drifted off to sleep, it was the image of sunlight glinting on wheat-colored hair and the echo of a deep voice saying her name that followed her into dreams. The next morning dawned clear and bright. Helena dressed in her most practical outfit, a sturdy skirt of dark brown wool, a crisp white shirtwaist, and a fitted jacket. She braided her hair and coiled it at the nape of her neck, securing it with extra pins to withstand the day's travels. After a hearty breakfast with Olivia and Helena stepped onto the porch to find Owen waiting, not with the wagon from yesterday but with 2 saddled horses. Good morning, he called, tipping his hat. I hope you don't mind riding. The mine's in rough country, easier to reach on horseback than by wagon. Helena hesitated. She had ridden in Boston's parks occasionally, but was by no means an accomplished horsewoman. I'm afraid my riding skills are rather rudimentary. Owen patted the neck of the smaller of the 2 horses, a pretty chestnut mare with a white blaze down her face. Penny here is gentle as a lamb. She'll take good care of you. Taking a deep breath, Helena nodded. Very well, but please be patient if I slow our progress. Owen helped her mount, his hands strong and steady at her waist as he lifted her into the saddle. The brief contact sent an unexpected warmth through her, which she firmly attributed to embarrassment at needing assistance. Once she was settled, Owen swung easily onto his own mount, a larger bay gelding. We'll take it slow. It's about an hour's ride to the Liberty Bell. The trail gets a bit steep in places, but these horses know the way. They set off at a walk, following a trail that led away from the ranch and toward the mountains. Owen was true to his word, setting an easy pace and offering occasional advice on how to sit or hold the reins. To Helena's relief, Penny did indeed seem content to follow Owen's horse with minimal guidance. As they rode, Owen pointed out landmarks and shared stories about the area. He knew every ridge and valley, every stream and stand of trees. His deep attachment to this land was evident in the way he spoke of it, with a mixture of reverence and intimate familiarity. You truly love it here, Helena observed during a brief rest to let the horses drink from a clear mountain stream. Owen looked up at the towering peaks above them. I can't imagine being anywhere else. There's a freedom here you can't find in the East, room to breathe, to be yourself without all the constraints of so-called civilization. Yet you have civilization, Helena countered. Ouray has hotels and businesses, schools and churches. The best of both worlds, Owen agreed with a smile. We take what works from the East and leave the rest behind. He remounted his horse. Come on, we're getting close now. The trail narrowed and grew steeper, winding through stands of aspen and pine. Helena focused on staying balanced in the saddle, grateful for Penny's steady temperament. Finally, they emerged into a small clearing where the remains of several wooden structures stood a large shed, what appeared to be an office, and the boarded-up entrance to the mine itself. Owen dismounted and helped Helena down from her horse. Her legs felt wobbly after the ride, and she was once again conscious of his strength as his hands encircled her waist. This time, he seemed to hold on a moment longer than necessary before stepping back. The Liberty Bell, he said, gesturing to the site. Once one of the more promising smaller operations in the area. Helena surveyed what was to have been her financial salvation with dismay. Even to her inexperienced eye, the mine looked abandoned and unsafe. The wooden supports around the entrance had warped and split, and a partial cave-in was visible just beyond the boards that had been nailed across the opening. You can see where the collapse happened, Owen explained, pointing. From what I heard, they were following a promising vein when the supports gave way. No one was badly hurt, but it scared the owner enough that he decided to sell rather than reinvest in making it safe. And my husband bought it, Helena said softly. Without ever seeing it, I imagine. Owen's expression was sympathetic. It wasn't an uncommon practice. Many Eastern investors bought mines sight unseen, based on reports that were often optimistic at best. Helena walked closer to the abandoned office, peering through a grimy window. Inside, she could see desks covered in dust, abandoned papers scattered across the floor. Is there truly no value here, then? Owen joined her at the window. I didn't say that. The assay reports indicated good silver content in the ore they were pulling out. The problem wasn't lack of silver, it was the stability of the shafts. Making it operational again would require significant investment. Which I don't have, Helena said, unable to keep the defeat from her voice. Owen was quiet for a moment, then said, There are options. You could try to sell the claim as is, though you wouldn't get much. You could seek investors to fund the repairs. Or, Helena prompted when he hesitated, or you could consider leasing the mine. Some of the larger mining companies might be interested in adding to their holdings without an outright purchase. You'd get a percentage of whatever they extract. Hope flickered in Helena's chest. Is that truly possible? Owen nodded. I know the manager at the Silver Queen Mining Company. They've been looking to expand. I could arrange an introduction if you'd like. Helena looked at him searchingly. Why are you helping me like this, Owen? You don't know me. You have no obligation to assist me with my affairs. Owen's blue eyes held her steadily. Maybe I just don't like seeing anyone struggling when I'm in a position to help. Or maybe I enjoy your company and am not in any hurry to see you leave Ouray. The simple honesty of this statement caught Helena off guard. Before she could formulate a response, a distant rumble of thunder broke the moment. Owen glanced up at the sky, where dark clouds were gathering over the mountains. Storm's coming in. We should head back before it hits. The ride back to the ranch was more hurried than their outward journey, with Owen keeping a watchful eye on the threatening skies. They were still a mile from the ranch when the first heavy drops began to fall. We won't make it back before it really starts coming down, Owen called over his shoulder. There's a lined shack just ahead. We can wait out the worst of it there. The small cabin appeared through the trees just as the heavens opened in earnest. By the time Owen had helped Helena dismount and led both horses under a crude lean-to beside the cabin, they were both soaked through. The line shack was simple but solid, a single room with a stone fireplace, a narrow cot against one wall, a rough table with 2 chairs, and shelves stocked with basic provisions. Owen moved efficiently, striking a match to light a lantern, then kneeling to build a fire in the fireplace. "You should take off your jacket," he said without looking up from his task. "It'll dry faster, and you'll be warmer." Helena hesitated only briefly before complying. The practical need to avoid a chill outweighed considerations of propriety. She removed her sodden jacket and hung it from a nail on the wall, conscious of how her damp shirtwaist clung to her figure. Owen, gentleman that he was, kept his attention fixed on building the fire. Soon, flames crackled cheerfully in the fireplace, pushing back the chill that had settled into Helena's bones. Owen stood, removed his own jacket and hung it beside hers before moving to the shelves. "There should be coffee here somewhere. Yes, here we are." He held up a tin triumphantly. "And a pot to brew it in. It won't be fancy, but it'll be hot." As he busied himself preparing coffee, Helena took the opportunity to study him more openly than she had before. Without his jacket, the breadth of his shoulders was more apparent, the fabric of his shirt stretching across muscles developed through years of physical labor. His movements were efficient but graceful, with none of the awkward formality of the city men she was accustomed to. When he turned and caught her watching, Helena didn't look away. Something had shifted between them in this small cabin, with rain drumming on the roof and a fire casting golden light across the simple space. "I never properly thanked you," she said, "for your kindness that first day in Ouray. You had no reason to help a stranger, yet you did." Owen set 2 tin cups of coffee on the table and pulled out a chair for her. "Anyone would have done the same." "No," Helena said, taking the offered seat. "Not anyone. I've traveled enough now to know that kindness to strangers is not as common as one might hope." Owen sat across from her, cradling his cup in his large hands. "Maybe I recognized something in you, a determination, a courage in coming all this way alone." He took a sip of his coffee before adding, "It couldn't have been easy, leaving everything familiar behind." "It wasn't," Helena admitted, "but there was nothing left for me in Boston, not after Thomas died." She rarely spoke of her late husband, finding most people uncomfortable with the subject. But here, in this remote cabin with rain sealing them away from the world, it felt natural to share. "Our marriage was not what I had expected. Thomas was kind enough, but we were matched by our parents more for convenience than affection." "I'm sorry," Owen said simply, without the awkward platitudes most offered. "The mine was to be his new start," Helena continued. "He'd made some poor investments and we were facing financial difficulties. The mine represented hope for a more secure future. When he died, pursuing that hope became my responsibility." "And now," Owen asked, "what will you do if you can arrange a lease for the mine?" Helena considered the question. It was one she had avoided thinking about too deeply. "Return to Boston, I suppose. It's the only home I've known." "Is that what you want?" The directness of his question was refreshing after years of polite circumlocution in Boston society. "I don't know any more," Helena admitted. "A week ago I would have said yes without hesitation, but now—" She gestured vaguely at the window, beyond which lay mountains and valleys of breathtaking beauty. "There's something compelling about this place, a freedom, as you said." Owen's eyes held hers across the small table. "Ouray has a way of getting under your skin, making you want to stay." The way he said it made Helena wonder if he was speaking of the town alone or something more. Before she could pursue the thought, He rose and went to check the window. Rain's letting up. We should be able to make it back to the ranch before dark if we leave soon. The spell broken, Helena nodded and stood, moving to retrieve her jacket. It was still damp but wearable. As she reached for it, Owen was there beside her, helping her slip it on. His fingers brushed the nape of her neck as he gently freed a strand of her hair from the collar, sending an unexpected shiver down her spine that had nothing to do with the coolness of the wet fabric. "Thank you," she murmured, not trusting herself to say more. The ride back to the ranch was completed mostly in silence, each lost in their own thoughts. The storm had passed, leaving the landscape washed clean, with late afternoon sunlight glinting off wet leaves and raindrops clinging to pine needles like tiny diamonds. When they reached Olivia's boarding house, Owen helped Helena dismount for the last time that day. "I'll speak to the mining company manager tomorrow," he said. "See if he's interested in discussing a lease arrangement." "I'm grateful for all your help," Helena replied, finding herself reluctant to end their time together. As if sensing her hesitation, Owen added, "Perhaps you'd like to join me for dinner tomorrow evening. I could tell you what I learned from the mining company and, well, I'd enjoy your company." A small smile curved Helena's lips. "I'd like that very much." As she watched him ride toward the main ranch house, leading Penny behind him, Helena acknowledged to herself that her interest in Owen Blackwell had grown beyond mere gratitude for his assistance. There was something about him, his quiet strength, his directness, his evident integrity that drew her in a way no man had before, not even her late husband. That evening, as she sat on the porch after supper enjoying the cool mountain air, Olivia joined her with 2 cups of tea. "I heard you and Owen got caught in the storm today," Olivia said, handing Helena one of the cups. "I hope it wasn't too miserable." "Not at all," Helena replied. "We found shelter in a line shack until the worst passed. Your brother was a perfect gentleman." Olivia's smile was knowing. "Owen's always a gentleman, but he doesn't usually offer to escort visitors to town or spend entire days helping them with their business matters." Helena felt warmth creep into her cheeks. "He's merely being kind." Olivia murmured noncommittally. After a moment, she added, "You know, I haven't seen him this interested in anyone since before he became marshal. There was a girl then daughter of a mine owner, but she couldn't tolerate the dangers of his job, left for Denver and married a banker." "I'm not staying in Ouray," Helena felt compelled to point out. "Once my business with the mine is settled, I'll be returning to Boston." Olivia regarded her with surprisingly perceptive eyes. "Will you? Are you certain that's still what you want?" The question echoed Owen's from earlier that day, and Helena found she still had no clear answer. "I don't know what else I would do. My life is in Boston." "A life can be rebuilt," Olivia said softly. "I've seen it happen many times out here. People come west for all sorts of reasons, running from something, chasing a dream, seeking a fresh start. Some leave again, but the ones who stay, they find something they didn't know they were looking for." Helena considered this as they sat in companionable silence, watching as the last light faded from the sky and stars began to appear, more numerous and brilliant than she had ever seen in Boston. "Your brother has invited me to dinner tomorrow evening," she said finally, "to discuss what he learns from the mining company." Olivia's smile was warm. "I'm glad. Owen dines alone too often. It will be good for him to have company." The next day passed slowly for Helena. She spent the morning writing letters to her solicitor in Boston, updating him on the mine situation, to her former neighbor, Mrs. Winters, who had promised to keep an eye on Helena's small house during her absence, and finally, to her brother-in-law, informing him that she was pursuing options for the mine, and would not require the assistance he had repeatedly offered to relieve her of the burden of managing Thomas's affairs. In the afternoon, she walked into town with Olivia, who needed supplies from the general store. Ouray looked different to Helena now than it had on that first day. What had seemed rough and intimidating then now appeared vibrant and full of possibility. She noticed details she had missed before: the careful craftsmanship of the buildings, the friendly nods exchanged between passers-by, the stunning backdrop of mountains visible from every street. At the general store, Olivia introduced Helena to the proprietor and several other local residents. Where there had been curious stares on her arrival, Helena now received smiles and welcoming words. It seemed that staying at Olivia Blackwell's boarding house and being seen in the company of Owen had granted her a measure of acceptance. As they walked back to the boarding house, packages in hand, Helena asked, "Is it always like this? Do newcomers always become part of the community so quickly?" Olivia considered the question. "Not always. Ouray has its share of transients, miners who stay only as long as their luck holds, gamblers passing through, drummers selling their wares. But those who show an interest in becoming part of the community, who treat others with respect, they're generally welcomed. Even unaccompanied women." Helena asked with a wry smile, remembering the hotel clerk's disapproval. "Even them," Olivia affirmed. "Though I'll admit it's easier when they have connections to respected locals, like my brother." Her eyes twinkled mischievously. "Speaking of whom, I believe that's him up ahead." Owen was indeed waiting on the porch of the boarding house, hat in hand. He straightened as they approached, and Helena was struck anew by how his presence seemed to fill the space around him. "Ladies," he greeted them, helping Olivia with her packages. "I hope I'm not intruding." "Not at all," Olivia assured him. "I'll just take these inside and leave you two to talk." When she had gone, Owen turned to Helena. "I spoke with Malcolm Jenkins at the Silver Queen Mining Company this morning. He's interested in the Liberty Bell." Helena's heart leapt. "Truly?" Owen nodded, a smile spreading across his face. "He'd like to meet with you tomorrow to discuss terms for a lease arrangement. I told him you were a shrewd businesswoman who wouldn't be easily taken advantage of." Helena laughed. "I hope I can live up to that description. I know precious little about mining leases." "I'll be there with you," Owen assured her. "Between the two of us, we'll make sure you get a fair deal." The warmth that flooded Helena at those words, "between the two of us," surprised her with its intensity. There was something so comforting, so right about the idea of facing this challenge not alone but with Owen at her side. "Thank you," she said softly, "for everything." Owen's eyes held hers for a long moment before he said, "I was hoping you still plan to join me for dinner this evening, to celebrate your potential good fortune." "I'd be delighted," Helena replied. "I'll pick you up at 6 then," Owen said, settling his hat back on his head. "Wear something nice. Not that you don't always look lovely," he added quickly, a hint of color rising in his tan cheeks. "But I thought we'd go to the Grand Hotel dining room. Best food in town." After he'd gone, Helena hurried to her room to assess her limited wardrobe options. She had packed primarily practical clothing for the journey, with only one dress that might be considered suitable for an elegant dinner. It was a deep burgundy silk with modest lace trim at the collar and cuffs, not the height of Boston fashion, but the best she had available. When Owen arrived that evening, driving a polished buggy rather than the wagon or riding horseback, Helena was waiting on the porch. She had arranged her hair more elaborately than usual, with soft curls framing her face, and had even used a touch of the rose-scented perfume she had brought as her one small luxury from home. Owen's appreciation was evident in his eyes as he helped her into the buggy. "You look beautiful, Helena." "Thank you," she replied, noting that he too had made an effort with his appearance. He wore a clean dark suit that fit his broad shoulders perfectly, a crisp white shirt, and a string tie. His hair was neatly combed, though a rebellious strand already threatened to fall across his forehead. The Grand Hotel was indeed grand by Ouray standards, 3 stories of imposing brick with elaborate cornices and a columned entrance. Inside, the dining room was elegant, with white tablecloths, crystal glasses, and a small orchestra playing quietly in the corner. As they were led to their table, Helena was aware of curious glances from other diners. Owen Blackwell was clearly well known, and his arrival with an unfamiliar woman caused a stir of interest. "I feel as though we're providing the evening's entertainment," she murmured as he held her chair. Owen smiled ruefully as he took his own seat. "Small-town curiosity. They're just not used to seeing me in such lovely company." The dinner that followed was one of the most enjoyable Helena could remember. The food was excellent trout fresh from mountain streams, tender venison, vegetables from local gardens, and a rich chocolate cake for dessert. But it was the conversation that made the evening special. Owen told stories of growing up in the Colorado mountains, of learning to track and hunt from his father, of his years as a lawman. Helena shared memories of her childhood in Boston, her love of books, her brief time teaching at a ladies' academy before her marriage. They discovered shared interests. Both loved poetry. Though Owen admitted he had limited access to books in Ouray, both enjoyed music and had played instruments in their youth. As the evening progressed, Helena found herself speaking more openly than she had with anyone in years, perhaps ever. There was something about Owen that invited honesty, that made her want to share not just facts but feelings. "I never felt I truly belonged in Boston society," she confessed as they lingered over coffee. "Even before Thomas died, I often felt like an observer rather than a participant in that life." The endless rounds of teas and dinner parties, the careful conversations where no one ever said what they really thought, it was suffocating at times. Owen nodded in understanding. "That's part of what drove my father west. He used to say that in the city, a man had to be what others expected. Out here, he could be himself." "Is that how you feel?" Helena asked. "That you can be yourself here?" "Yes," Owen replied without hesitation, "though I'll admit there are times when the responsibilities weigh heavily. Running the ranch, looking after Olivia, being the man people expect Owen Blackwell to be. Sometimes I wonder what it would be like to just ride into the mountains and not come back for a while." "But you never do," Helena observed. "No," Owen agreed. "Because at the end of the day, I love this life. The hard work, the challenges, the freedom of it. I wouldn't trade it for any city comforts." As he spoke, his passion for his way of life was evident, and Helena found herself envying his certainty. What would it be like, she wondered, to feel such a deep connection to a place, to know without doubt where you belonged? The thought stayed with her as Owen drove her back to the boarding house later that evening. The night was clear, with a full moon silvering the landscape and stars scattered like diamonds across the sky. Neither spoke much during the journey, but it was a comfortable silence, wrapped in the shared memories of their evening. When they arrived, Owen helped her down from the buggy, his hands lingering at her waist a moment longer than necessary. In the moonlight, his eyes were dark and unreadable as they studied her face. "Thank you for a wonderful evening," Helena said softly. "The pleasure was mine," Owen replied, his voice equally low. Then, with a gentleness that contrasted with his strength, he raised one hand to lightly touch her cheek. "Helena." The way he said her name sent a tremor through her. She knew he was going to kiss her, knew she should step back, maintain the proper distance between them. Instead, she found herself leaning slightly closer, His lips, when they met hers, were warm and surprisingly soft. The kiss was brief, gentle, a question more than a demand. When he drew back, his eyes searched hers, looking for any sign of regret or discomfort. Helena found herself smiling. "Good night, Owen," she whispered, touching his hand briefly before turning to go inside. "Good night, Helena," he replied, and she could hear the smile in his voice. "I'll see you tomorrow, 9 o'clock, for the meeting with Jenkins." As she readied herself for bed that night, Helena's thoughts were a whirl of conflicting emotions. Excitement about the potential lease of the mine was now entangled with a growing attachment to Owen Blackwell. An attachment that complicated her plans to return to Boston once her business was concluded. "It's just gratitude and proximity," she tried to tell herself as she brushed her hair. "A natural response to his kindness. It doesn't change anything." But as she lay in bed watching moonlight create patterns on the ceiling, Helena knew she was lying to herself. What she felt for Owen went beyond gratitude. There was a connection between them that she had never experienced before, not with Thomas, not with anyone. The next morning brought practical concerns back to the forefront. Helena dressed with care for the meeting with Malcolm Jenkins, choosing her most businesslike attire, a navy blue walking suit with crisp white trim that she hoped projected confidence and competence. Owen arrived promptly at 9, driving the same buggy from the previous evening. "Ready to negotiate?" he asked as he helped her in. "As ready as I'll ever be," Helena replied. "Though I'm grateful you'll be there, I fear Mr. Jenkins would quickly outmaneuver me if I were on my own." "Don't sell yourself short," Owen said as he took his seat beside her. "You're smarter than most of the men who try to do business in this town. Just remember what we discussed. Don't accept the first offer. Be firm about quarterly payments rather than annual, and insist on the right to inspect the operations." The Silver Queen Mining Company offices were located in a substantial brick building on Ouray's Main Street. Malcolm Jenkins, the manager, was a stocky man in his 50s with shrewd eyes and a carefully trimmed beard. He greeted them with professional courtesy, though Helena noted how his manner warmed considerably when addressing Owen. The meeting that followed was both more complex and more successful than Helena had anticipated. Jenkins was indeed interested in leasing the Liberty Bell, with plans to connect it to an adjacent mine already operated by Silver Queen. He offered terms that, while initially seeming generous, Owen quietly indicated could be improved upon. Helena surprised herself with her ability to negotiate. Drawing on what she had learned from observing her father's business dealings, and from managing her own limited affairs after Thomas's death, she stood firm on several points that Jenkins had clearly hoped to gloss over. By the end of the meeting, they had reached an agreement that would provide Helena with a steady income from the mine without requiring her personal involvement in its operation. "We'll have the papers drawn up within the week, Mrs. Vaughn," Jenkins said as they concluded. "Assuming all goes well with the initial safety improvements, we could begin extracting ore by late summer." As they left the office, Owen gave her an approving smile. "You were impressive in there. Jenkins isn't used to being challenged, especially by someone he underestimated." Helena felt a glow of pride at his words. "I had an excellent advisor." They stopped for lunch at a small cafe, both in high spirits from the successful negotiation. As they ate, Helena found her thoughts turning again to the question that had kept her awake much of the night. What now? With the mine lease arranged, her ostensible reason for staying in Ouray would soon be concluded. Logic and all her previous plans dictated that she should return to Boston. Yet the thought of leaving this place, these mountains, and especially the man sitting across from her filled her with a sadness that caught her by surprise with its intensity. "Owen," she began hesitantly. "I've been thinking about what happens next, after the lease is finalized." A shadow crossed his face, quickly masked. "You'll be heading back east, I suppose, back to your life in Boston." Helena toyed with her fork, not meeting his eyes. "That was the plan, but now I'm not sure." "Oh," the single word held a wealth of carefully restrained hope. "I find myself reluctant to leave Ouray," Helena admitted. "There's something about this place, these mountains, and the people." She looked up then, meeting his gaze directly. One person in particular. Owen reached across the table to take her hand, his larger one engulfing hers with gentle strength. "Stay," he said simply. "Stay in Ouray. Give this a chance to grow into whatever it might become." The directness of his request took her breath away. There was no artifice in Owen Blackwell, no hidden agenda or careful manipulation. Just honest feeling, openly expressed. "I hardly know you," she protested weakly. "We met less than a week ago." "Sometimes a week is enough to know," Owen replied. "I knew the moment I saw you standing in that hotel lobby, facing down Simmons with your chin up and your back straight despite being exhausted from your journey. You had a courage and dignity that called to something in me." Helena felt tears threaten at the sincerity in his voice. "And what about practical matters? Where would I live? What would I do?" "You could stay at Olivia's as long as you like," Owen said. "As for what you do, that would be up to you. Ouray needs a school teacher. Helena mentioned the position is open. Or you could help Olivia with the boarding house, or start something of your own." His thumb traced gentle circles on the back of her hand. "The point is, you'd have choices. And you wouldn't be alone in making them." The promise implicit in those words that he would be there, supporting her as she found her place, was almost overwhelming. Helena had grown accustomed to facing life's challenges alone, first in a marriage that had been more a business arrangement than a partnership, then as a widow navigating a world designed for men. "I need time," she said finally. "Time to think, to be certain." Owen nodded, though she could see the disappointment he tried to hide. "Of course. Take all the time you need." Over the next few days, as the legal documents for the mine lease were prepared, Helena found herself increasingly torn. The life she had known in Boston seemed distant and colorless compared to the vibrancy of her days in Ouray. Yet the thought of staying, of building a new life so far from everything familiar, was daunting. She spoke with Olivia about the teaching position, discovering that it was indeed available for the coming school year. She visited the small schoolhouse at the edge of town, finding it simple but well-maintained, with large windows that framed views of the mountains. "You'd be welcome to stay on permanently at the boarding house," Olivia assured her when Helena inquired about longer-term lodging. "Though I suspect my brother would prefer to offer you alternative arrangements eventually." Her eyes twinkled with good-natured teasing. On the fourth day after their meeting with Jenkins, the lease papers were ready for Helena's signature. Owen accompanied her to the lawyer's office, his presence a steady reassurance as she read through the complex legal language. When she finally put her name to the documents, it was with a sense of accomplishment tinged with uncertainty about what would come next. "It's done," she said as they emerged into the bright July sunshine. "The Liberty Bell is officially leased to Silver Queen Mining for the next 5 years, with an option to renew. The quarterly payments would provide her with a modest but reliable income enough to live comfortably in Ouray, or to supplement her limited resources if she returned to Boston." "Congratulations," Owen said warmly. "You've secured your future, whatever you decide to do next." Though he spoke cheerfully, Helena could detect an undercurrent of tension in his voice. He had not pressed her for an answer since their lunch 4 days earlier, but she knew he was waiting, hoping. "I'd like to show you something," she said impulsively. "If you have time this afternoon," Owen's eyebrows rose in surprise. Of course. What did you have in mind? It's a surprise, Helena replied with a small smile, but we'll need horses. An hour later, they were riding along a trail that Helena had discovered on one of her solitary walks earlier in the week. It led up through a pine forest to a small meadow high on the mountainside, overlooking the valley where Ouray nestled. Wildflowers carpeted the ground in a riot of color: blue lupines, orange paintbrush, purple asters, and dozens of others Helena couldn't name. It's beautiful, Owen said as they dismounted at the edge of the meadow. How did you find this place? I've been doing a lot of walking, Helena explained, thinking, trying to make a decision. She moved to stand at the edge of the meadow where the ground fell away, offering a panoramic view of the mountains and valleys spread out below. I wanted you to see it with me. Owen came to stand beside her, close enough that their shoulders nearly touched. For a long moment they simply gazed at the vista in silence. Then Helena turned to face him. I'm staying, Owen, she said quietly. I've accepted the teaching position for the fall term. I'm going to give us a chance. The joy that blazed across his face was like sunrise breaking over the mountains. Without a word, he pulled her into his arms, holding her as though she were precious beyond measure. When he finally spoke, his voice was rough with emotion. I was afraid you'd go back east, that I'd never see you again. Helena leaned back in his embrace to look up at him. I realized something these past few days. Boston was my past, a past I was already growing away from even before I came west. But here with you, this could be my future. Owen's kiss was different this time, not a gentle question, but a passionate affirmation. Helena responded with equal fervor, her arms twining around his neck as she gave herself to the moment completely. When they finally broke apart, both breathing heavily, Owen rested his forehead against hers. I think I'm falling in love with you, Helena Vaughn. I know it's too soon to say such things, but Helena silenced him with another brief kiss. It's not too soon, not when it's true, because I think I'm falling in love with you too, Owen Blackwell. The summer passed in a golden haze of happiness for Helena. She settled into life at Olivia's boarding house, forming a close friendship with the younger woman that felt more like the relationship of sisters than landlady and tenant. She prepared for her role as Ouray's new school teacher, reviewing textbooks and developing lesson plans with Helena's experienced guidance. And always, there was Owen. He courted her properly, with buggy rides and picnics, dinners at the Grand Hotel, and evenings spent on the boarding house porch talking for hours under the star-filled sky. He introduced her to his ranch hands and business associates, proudly including her in all aspects of his life. Helena bloomed under his attention and the freedom of her new life. Away from the constraints of Boston society, she discovered facets of herself that had never had the opportunity to develop: a love of the outdoors, an adventurous spirit, a quiet confidence in her own capabilities. By August, when the mountain meadows were at their most glorious, and the aspen leaves were just beginning to hint at the golden transformation to come, Helena knew with certainty that her decision to stay had been the right one. She belonged here in this wild, beautiful place, with this man who valued her strength as much as her softness. They were riding back from a day spent exploring a series of hidden valleys that Owen had known since childhood when he suddenly reined his horse to a stop. What is it? Helena asked, halting beside him. Owen seemed uncharacteristically nervous, running a hand through his hair in a gesture she had come to recognize as a sign of inner turmoil. I had planned to do this differently. At the Grand Hotel, perhaps, or that meadow you love so much. Somewhere special. Helena's heart began to beat faster. Do what differently? Instead of answering directly, Owen dismounted and came to help her down from her horse. When her feet touched the ground, he didn't release her waist, but instead lowered himself to one knee before her, still holding her hands in his. "Helena Vaughn, I love you. These past 2 months have been the happiest of my life. I want to spend all my remaining days with you, building a life together, sharing everything that comes, good or bad." His voice, usually so steady, trembled slightly. "Will you marry me?" Tears sprang to Helena's eyes, not of sorrow but of overwhelming joy. "Yes," she whispered, then louder. "Yes, Owen Blackwell, I will marry you." He rose and swept her into his arms, kissing her with a passion that left no doubt of his feelings. When they finally broke apart, both laughing and breathless, Owen reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. "I've been carrying this around for a week, waiting for the perfect moment," he admitted, opening the box to reveal a ring. It was a simple but elegant design, a small diamond flanked by 2 sapphires that matched the blue of his eyes, set in gold. "It was my mother's. My father gave it to her when they decided to make their life out west. I thought it fitting, since you've made the same brave choice." As he slipped the ring onto her finger, Helena felt a sense of rightness, of coming home in a way she had never experienced before. This was where she belonged, not in a specific place, though she had come to love Ouray deeply, but with this man who had opened his heart to her as completely as she had opened hers to him. They were married in late September, just after the school term began. The ceremony was held in Ouray's small church, with Olivia as Helena's attendant and Jenkins from the Silver Queen Mining Company standing up for Owen. The entire town seemed to attend, filling the church and spilling out onto the steps, eager to witness the union of the respected rancher and the new schoolteacher who had captured his heart. Helena wore a gown of ivory silk that Olivia had helped her make, with lace from her mother's wedding dress incorporated into the bodice and sleeves. Owen, resplendent in a new suit, could not take his eyes off her as she walked down the aisle to meet him at the altar. Their vows were simple but heartfelt, promises to love, honor, and cherish each other through whatever life might bring. When the pastor pronounced them husband and wife, Owen's kiss was both tender and possessive, a public declaration of a private devotion that had grown from an unexpected act of kindness into a love neither had been looking for, but both had been ready to embrace. The celebration afterward was held at the Blackwell Ranch, with tables set up in the yard under strings of lanterns. There was music and dancing, food and drink in abundance, and congratulations from what seemed like every resident of Ouray County. Late in the evening, as the party continued around them, Owen led Helena away from the festivities and toward the house that would now be their home. He had spent the weeks since their engagement preparing it for her arrival, adding feminine touches to the solidly masculine space curtains at the windows, a proper dining table to replace the rough one he had used when dining alone, fresh paint in the bedroom. At the threshold, he paused and swept her up into his arms. "Welcome home, Mrs. Blackwell," he said, his voice husky with emotion. Helena wrapped her arms around his neck, marveling at how this place that had been unknown to her just months ago could now feel so right, so perfectly where she was meant to be. "Home," she agreed softly. "With you." Later that night, as moonlight spilled through the bedroom window and the sounds of the celebration faded into the distance, Helena lay in her husband's arms, more content than she had ever imagined possible. The journey that had begun with a hotel's refusal and a stranger's kindness had led her to a life richer and more fulfilling than any she could have planned. "What are you thinking?" Owen asked, his fingers gently tracing patterns on her bare shoulder. Helena smiled up at him, her heart full to overflowing. I'm thinking how grateful I am that the Silvertop Hotel refused me a room that day. If they hadn't, we might never have met." Owen chuckled, the sound rumbling pleasantly under her ear where it rested against his chest. "I'd like to think we would have found each other somehow. Some things are just meant to be." As she drifted toward sleep in the safety of his embrace, Helena found herself agreeing. Some things were indeed meant to be, like finding love and home in the most unexpected of places, with the most unexpected of people. Her last conscious thought was one of profound gratitude for the twist of fate that had brought her to Ouray, Colorado, and into the arms of Owen Blackwell. The years that followed brought challenges and joys in equal measure, as all lives do. Helena continued teaching at the Ouray school until the arrival of their first child, a son they named James Thomas Blackwell, in the summer of 1887. By then, the Silver Queen Mining Company had made the Liberty Belle productive again, providing a steady supplemental income that allowed the Blackwells to expand their ranch operations and build a larger home to accommodate their growing family. Their second child, a daughter named Olivia Eleanor after the two women who had been such important parts of their love story, arrived in 1889. A second son, William Henry, completed their family in 1892. The children grew strong and healthy in the mountain air, learning to ride almost as soon as they could walk, developing the same love for the land that their father had inherited from his parents. Helena eventually returned to teaching, but in a different capacity, offering lessons in her home to children from outlying ranches who couldn't attend the town school regularly. She also became active in community affairs, helping to establish Ouray's first library and serving on committees that gradually brought more amenities to the growing town. Owen continued to build the ranch into one of the most successful operations in the county. When the mining boom eventually slowed, as all such booms do, the Blackwell Ranch remained solid, a testament to his foresight in diversifying their interests beyond solely providing horses for the mines. Through it all, their love remained the foundation that supported everything else. The passion of their early days matured into a deep, abiding connection that weathered every storm, from blizzards that isolated the ranch for weeks to the near loss of their youngest son to pneumonia one bitter winter. From drought years when the ranch struggled to prosperous times when they could afford small luxuries. On the 10th anniversary of their wedding, Owen surprised Helena with a trip back east to visit what remained of her family and to show their children the world their mother had come from. While Boston held fond memories for Helena, she found herself eager to return to Colorado, to the mountains and valleys that had become more truly home than the city of her birth had ever been. "No regrets?" Owen asked as their train began the final climb into the Rockies. The children pressed against the windows in excitement at the familiar landscape coming into view. Helena took his hand, the one that had lifted her onto Penny's back that first day, that had built their home and cradled their newborn children, that had held hers through joy and sorrow for a decade now. "Not one," she said with absolute conviction. "Every step of the journey led exactly where I was meant to be." As the train rounded a curve and the San Juan Mountains appeared in all their majesty, Helena felt the familiar rush of homecoming. Ouray lay just ahead, nestled in its valley like a jewel, the town that had once refused her a room but had ultimately given her a life beyond anything she could have imagined. Beside her, Owen squeezed her hand, his eyes reflecting the same contentment she felt in her heart. From the most inauspicious of beginnings, a tired traveler, a reluctant hotel clerk, and a gallant stranger offering an unexpected solution had grown a love that had not just endured but flourished, becoming stronger and deeper with each passing year. As the train whistle announced their approach to the Ouray station, Helena leaned against her husband's shoulder, surrounded by their children's excited chatter. In that moment, she knew with absolute certainty that all roads in her life, even the difficult ones, perhaps especially those, had been leading her here, to this place, this man, this family, this life that was so much more than she had ever dared to dream possible.